President and Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot improve what we have seen from that side, and certainly Bill has mentioned everything I was going to talk about. Left. In spite of that, I also have a list that's longer than I can fill in 12 minutes, so I have to follow my talk a little bit on paper and see how it comes out. First, I want to say that I consider it a tremendous honor to be one of the Houston Geological Society Geolegends and have members with me on both sides. I really always like very much. Due to the time, I cannot mention everything I want to do, so keep it short and give a little bit about my life, which I think is exciting. And there is no better field in the world than geologists, I tell you. I was born and raised in Groningen, in the northern part of the Netherlands, very often called Holland. And in high school, I became enthusiastic about rocks. Don't ask me why. And I got to know a fantastic person. He had 2 years of schooling. He was a grave digger. And I helped him digging graves and got beautiful rocks out of it as fossils. All artificial, brought to the northern part of Holland by the last ice age from out of Scandinavia. I had no idea it was a field you could do. About the third year of my high school, I walked into a student. He was a geology student. He said, "Shoot, if you can study that is a profession. I know what I can do." Because my mother wanted me to be a veterinarian, my father an engineer, and both I liked not to do. So, that was it. The only major change that I have done from paleontology, I became a sedimentologist. I thought it was more interesting. In 1951, I started my studies in Groningen at the university, and Professor Kuhne and Dr. van Straten became my major mentors. After 6 months, typical Dutch perhaps, I was forced to join the army. No way to postpone that or even to select what direction you want to go. I became a motor transport officer and never driven a car in my life. I learned it over there. And a year and a half later, my father died. Pressure from the Gulf War. A long time ago. Anyhow, Kuhne said, as soon as you come back, then I give you an assistantship. No salary, but an office. And he was strange. He never informed any of the students what his strength was in science. He didn't allow anyone to go into the basement. When I was his assistant, I got it all. I had to work in the basement. Little pebbles going around and around and around and around and getting round. Drove me nuts. And then I was involved with experiments. A big flume and mix, all the stuff, pour it in, that was a bit of the that excited, really. And then in the summers, I went with Van Straten and go to the Dutch islands and around. So then Den Haag came, and that was before he died. I also taught, after half a year study, a class on paleontology. I don't know anything about it, didn't have done my exam. But he didn't have one PhD. He also had one PhD to do all those things for him. So I had to do it. And then he said, you like that stuff. Why don't you go with Den Haag to Italy, where he does his work on the turbidites. Well, it was great. There's a whole story there. I have to bypass just the time. It was great. Anyhow, that started actually that Kuhne and I didn't agree with a lot of things. And I was just a student, didn't know anything. After that, Kuhn suggested that I went to Utrecht, University of Utrecht, because he didn't want any students getting a master's under him. That was not good for his time. He was too busy doing research. So I went there and got this Professor Douglas, who was good in grain science and mineralogy. Man, I learned a lot. Forgot it also. And so then he also said, why don't you go to southeast France and do your master's there on the turbidites? I've seen it. I drove through something. I was there for 3 days. And I think it's great. You just can prove that I was correct. The first time in my life that I dare to say to other professors combined to Kuhn, I cannot agree with what you told me, that each 100,000 meters, one delta collapsed and covered the whole area. And what these are is just some erosional remnants of basically sheets of turbidites. I said that are monsters. I said, sorry. I looked at all these basics and say, well, these are independent basics. They are connected, but they're independent. And so that is not one. Well, he didn't like, of course, that I had a different opinion. Nevertheless. Then my new professor Douglas said, well, why don't you give a talk at the International Association of Sedimentology conference in Switzerland, 1959. It was also long ago. Problem is, I had to do it in French. First time, last time, too, by the way. And I gave a talk, and suddenly, out of a dark audience, came a voice. Typical French, they talk so fast, you have no idea what they're talking about. So I said, please repeat it. And a couple friends from Shell were sitting there. Anyhow, I say, man, let's discuss it. I collected my professor and we went there. She said, you are not allowed to work there. Well, she never indicated why not. Madame Coubler was the boss of the sedimentology division of the Institut Petrol Français. High person, as such. We became good friends later on. Well, talking. Finally, she said that was typical French also. That a guy, Nanton, had claimed that area for Thèse de l'Université. It's the highest PhD degree in France, and it takes you 10 years to do it. So you have to be related to a university to have a life. And afterwards he said, well, he doesn't know anything about sedimentology. So if you do only sedimentology, nothing else, which I've done, but didn't tell it, you can do it. But also don't go over the river far. And she didn't say that. No. Okay, I did that, got busy enough. And I had developed a logging system based on shell, changed somewhat, and I started working very detailed on it. And after coming back from the first field period in southern France, I laid them out and saw a cycle. And after a while I said, hey, let's call it turbulent sequence. I have no idea who called that the bound sequence. Part was very simple. Because each one I met, oh, you must be the son of Bouma, because at that time, your name could not be mentioned if you're not 6 feet under. Okay. Well, after that, in the international meeting, I walked for a second time into Francis Shepard, professor at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. We discussed if my sequence was also in the Scanians, and he said, no, I don't know. Why don't you come over and give you a Fulbright postdoctoral fellowship? Well, at that time, it was very difficult to get to America. We were married, and I said, hey, let's go. We had one son at that time. Take the street, maybe once in a lifetime. I had the possibility to stay in Holland and teach like that, and I looked forward to it because all professors were 10 years old, 10 times my age, and I would kill a youngster. So, anyhow, we had a fantastic time, and we both agreed we have to go back to America. Well, we stayed 3 years in Holland and then emigrated. I had contacts with a couple universities and some companies. Companies say, we don't want you because in no time the university will buy you, and we miss you after we have trained you. So I met then, where he is, somewhere there, Bill Bryant, and since that time, of 1966, we have been fantastic friends. If we were together or not, and had a lot of stories we can tell you about being on board ship, I tell you. Great. So, after a while, in 74, 75, it became difficult for students to find a job. It was just one of those low periods. And I called the U.S. Geological Survey and said, well, yeah, we can use a few, provided you come too. We were also financially low at A&M, and I said, okay, fine, why not? Went to Texas and worked for close to 4 years in Alaska. That's great, all by ship, of course, marine work. And then friends of ours from Corpus Christi, the USDS there, asked me to come over, and we had invited him and his wife. And I had 3 little boys sitting there on the table too. We had invited them for dinner when they visited the area there where we lived. And before I could say that he's thinking about that, he said, Dad, can we go tomorrow? So we went about a year later to Corpus Christi, and unfortunately I became in charge of that small office. And they had taught me in the meantime how to bring in money, and a lot of other things, amongst others, giving short courses to industry that was not allowed at that time, and a couple other things not allowed. But a lot of the money went to LSU and A&M, and my bosses up east, of course, didn't like that, and they forced me to get to headquarters. How people knew it before I really had followed it, I don't know, but I got several offers, and something like 15 in 2 weeks. And I went around a few, selected Dolbo. That was fantastic. Had a good time, went to several ranks, also some I didn't like. It was finally, how you call it, vice president. That was not too much administration, it was not Georgia. Anyhow, when the office moved to Houston, I was able to obtain my chief scientist position back. And when Chevron took over Gulf, it was a different way. And I had to go back to the West Coast. 2 things, I didn't like it. And my friend Jim Bouma from LSU, who I had asked to be a co-leader at the DP last cruise here in the Gulf of Mexico in this case, he said, hey, we have a place open from Foreign McCourt and our professorship. I think I can get you that. So I went over, had a good time. Stayed there too long, because Louisiana is not a state where you should live too long. I had a lot of students working in several locations, ranging from Arkansas, West Texas, even California, several in between, and the Tampa crew were in AIDS in South Africa. I walked in there, completely accidental, had a hell of a good time, and Lita was my paper pusher. Of course, so we were gone sometimes for 3 months or 6 months. We had a hell of a good time. We felt South African, And I could talk a little bit South African because it's close to Dutch. You know, they just went in different directions. It was a little different, but enjoyable. We even found a good spot for a house. Later we gave that up. Because the kids living here in this state. Anyhow, we had a good time. Over 15 students, a few of them from South Africa, the rest from here, basically via LSU, got a degree out of it. And we have a few here in the audience. So altogether, we had a hell of a good time. But we wanted to go back to our state, where we were dropped the first time. That's Texas. So here we are. And now I'm a young professor. That's great at Texas A&M. Geology and geophysics. I'd like to do the same for oceanography. I'm my own boss and do what I want. And that's the following. Over the last years, I also became interested in shales. And last year, during the AAPG convention in Calgary, I suggested at a meeting to develop in general, between the industry and universities, a geology, geophysics, geochemistry, petroleum engineering program to study these deposits. Because at the moment we get gas out of it, but nobody can tell you why that one is good and that one not good. What are the criteria for that pluses and minuses? Nobody knows. And that is actually a waste because it scares a lot of companies to do it. And I think that is a source for oil, but specifically gas, and we should make use of it. Also become more independent so we can kick other people. And you know who I am talking about. So, industry people say, that's great, that's what we need, because we don't have the manpower to do it. But on the other hand, the total surplus is too big for one university or research group to do it. So we have to merge universities working together as such. That by itself is a challenge, knowing universities. And secondly, is we have to report to the industry at certain intervals, because they have to pay for it. And I'm not far enough yet, but I hope in another half year that we start really running as such. So that is what I have in mind. Become a member of the graduate school again, start working with students and supervise them and all that stuff without doing teaching, except on a personal level. I think that is the future for me. And although my life as a geologist, and as well as Zineke, next Monday, 46 years, we had a fantastic life, and we plan to go on like this, and I think we will. Thank you very much.
This is fantastic.